allegations of abuse of special ed children on Long Island. Now, several families, they're suing the Long Beach School District. We'll speak with the attorney who's representing those families. Then Donald Trump softening his stance on abortion. He's also asking the Republican Party to do the same. We're going to get reaction from the head of Planned Parenthood, Cecile Richards. Also, another big day of primaries coming up this Tuesday. Could it be the day that Trump sews things up? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Several families, they are suing the Long Beach School District out on Long Island, alleging that the special education students were abused by a teacher and two of her aides. The suit alleges, among other things, that these kids were tied up, locked in bathrooms, yelled at, even stepped on by stiletto heels. There are also allegations of sexual misconduct as well. Now, the accused teacher here, Lisa Weitzman, is on administrative leave as we speak. Her attorney, though, releasing the following statement, calling her, quote, a dedicated teacher who was loved by her students and their parents. She vehemently denies doing anything to harm these children, but rather she fought to get them services and rights which the district failed to provide, end quote. For their part, Long Beach School Superintendent David Weiss released the following statement. The Long Beach School District has complied and will continue to comply with all federal and state legal requirements regarding complaints to the district about possible abuse or mistreatment of our students. Now, Attorney Brad Gerstmann, he is representing the families in question, and he's kind enough to join us out of his offices in Long Island. Brad, usually we'll talk about things related to politics, etc. here, but when we read some of the complaints in here and some of the allegations, it makes your stomach turn. Put a face on this. We're talking about kids with developmental disabilities, and the allegations run from mistreatment to physical and sexual abuse of some of the most vulnerable populations. Do I have it right?
Richard, you have it exactly right. It's really appalling. And as you said, stomach turning. I agree with that characterization. It's absolutely awful. You take the most vulnerable people, autistic young individuals, and these are nonverbal individuals, so they couldn't even complain properly. Although there are allegations and there are witnesses that will testify, that will state that the children were crying and screaming from some of the pain and agony and fear that these teachers put them through. So. It really is awful, hard to believe it's happening, under your nose. But Richard, what really makes this even worse is the fact that since 2009, some complaints had been coming and filtering into the district's administrators about this teacher, about this classroom, and about some of the abuse that was going on. And all of it was dusted under the rug. And that was really what makes this even worse, because it wasn't until 2014 where the teacher in question was removed from the classroom, as well as the teacher aides.
And the teacher in question, we've read her denial, and also she continues to be paid nearly $100,000 throughout this proceeding. Brad, have you seen anything in terms of he said evidence, so it's not a he said, she said? Are there any photos? Is there any physical evidence that leads us to believe here, especially when we're talking about kids that have trouble communicating for themselves, frankly, that makes you pretty sure that this, in fact, really happened?
Yeah, well, there's a number of pieces of evidence, and it all goes from videos to individual eyewitness testimony. Most of that right now is in the is property of the school district themselves. They have that, but we know what that evidence is and what it says. And as a result, we will be able to get it through the process of a federal lawsuit and subpoena power and the like. But there is evidence of everything that we alleged and everything that you mentioned and more. And it is quite disgusting. But again, what I really want to focus on as well, because defendants in this lawsuit include all the administrators as well, including the superintendent, who knew firsthand about this. But what the superintendent did, instead of trying to shut down the classroom and shut down this teacher and go find out what's going on in 2009, 2010 through 2014, instead what the superintendent did was he and his administrators were threatening the witnesses. Keep in mind, there are a lot of people. There are other teacher aides that are in and out of these classrooms. There are there's staff within the school, non-educational staff, custodians and the like, secretaries, that had witnessed some of this. And instead, what the superintendent did was try to intimidate and threaten these individuals to keep this quiet, because the optics obviously would be awful for Long Beach School District.
And let's just put a finer point. I talked about some of the things, but I used some pretty words to describe it. If true, it isn't just that these people, this woman should never have been in the front of a classroom. It's not just yelling at somebody. These kids, allegedly, not just beaten, sitting in their own feces at times here, forced medication on them, locking them in closets or with basically ties on their hands, but even allegedly sexually abusing these children as well. Is that right?
Yeah, there's sexual exploitation. And back to what you said also about some of the medications. How about the Gringus family, who we represent, and their child could not eat any wheat, and they were just feeding the child, bread and all kinds of items in order to exacerbate an already problematic stomach issue. So it was just it was so sadistic in what these teachers were doing that you can't even fathom that this is still going on in our day and age, when there's so much coverage of those with autism and developmental disabilities, that somebody would even consider taking advantage of these kind of kids.
I know you're a big advocate in the autism community before this story ever came to light, but there's a possibility this thing gets even wider, isn't it, Brad? That it may not just be the 4 kids in question, but you fully expect you're going to hear from more families and more kids as a result of this, right?
Yeah, well, there's 2 points to it, and we're getting calls all the time since this story broke, and we have individuals coming in today, and keep in mind, from 2009 and maybe earlier than that, that's when the first complaints came in. Who knows what happened before that? And we don't know the extent of this, and as a result, I think we will. And media coverage like what you're providing here will be very helpful to the public. But in addition, the Nassau DA obviously is looking into this. We've been given some insight into their investigation, and we're not sure where it's going to end up. We feel like it will end up in a multitude of arrests. However, we can't say that specifically at this point in time. The DA is looking at all the evidence, so we feel good about it.
A horrible story, and of course we'll keep our viewers updated, and we'll be checking in with you, Brad. Best of luck with the case.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, everyone. Planned Parenthood, as you know, the target of frequent attacks, especially from folks on the right side of the aisle. But could attacking that group hurt the GOP get out the women's vote? Well, the head of that group, Cecile Richards, she'll join us in the program next.